The Smurfs is a franchise that's been around for more than 65 years at this point, so I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with it, and the understanding that this is a franchise that's made for children. So it's probably easy to dismiss the Smurfs Flower Defense as a VR game, or an MR game, as it's been positioned. But to do so would be very wrong, because the Smurfs Flower Defense is fantastic, and you should go and buy it right now.
Ha! I can smurf enemies anywhere in the battlefield. My crossbow slows enemies down.
The Smurfs Flower Defense is a tower defense game. It's not a real-time strategy game like Crystal Commanders, for example, which we reviewed up here and is also great. But it does have a lot of real-time interaction despite being a tower defense game. So in the usual tower defense formula, you have resources which you can spend to create towers, which will line the path the enemy will take, a predetermined path that you know before the wave begins. And these towers will slowly take out the enemy, creating more resources for you to build more towers. It's a pretty simple and formulaic system on the base level, but there's much more to the Smurfs Flower Defense than simply this action. Each tower you build must have a Smurf assigned to it, and when you begin the level, you'll have a pool of Smurfs to choose from. You can pick up and move towers across the map during the game with the Smurf that you've assigned, but you will not earn additional Smurfs during a level, and each level has multiple waves to fight through. As such, early on in the game, you will learn this is the pathway, these are the towers from the variety of catapults and slingshots and whatever else you may have. You'll learn to place them in appropriate channels in order to prevent the incursion of insects that are coming. And you can also build walls to slow them down and so on. But later in the game, you'll realise when you have several different channels that the enemies are coming from and only a limited amount of resources, you will need to deploy towers and then move them mid-map in order to ensure that you are getting appropriate coverage. Furthermore, there are special Smurfs that you unlock as the game progresses, which have different abilities. And the first one, and the one we're going to pick up on here, which is key, is Smurfette. Now, Smurfette does not go into your pool of Smurfs that you can assign to towers. Instead, she gives you a special ability, which is real-time playing out during the map, during the game, during the waves. As I say, the way that this functions on a basic level is that you have resources to build towers, you build those towers, activate the wave, and the enemies start coming. But it's not just enemies on the ground. There are enemies that come at head height towards you as well, both ones that shoot directly at you, the player, and also will drop bombs and such on your towers on your map. And with Smurfette, you are given a gun. And it's a gun that you fire in real time, both at the enemies in the sky and the enemies on the ground. Now, this starts off relatively simply, but it builds to something quite complex when you're trying to manage both the resources on the ground and the enemies that are in the sky. You'll have to be constantly aware of what is happening, especially as the towers that you build and the walls that you build can be damaged. So you'll be wanting to flick between both the gun that you have with Smurfette shooting at the enemies that are coming at you in the sky, and Brainy, another Smurf, who can build the structures. So when you gather the resources, maybe a wall is being attacked and you need to spend some resources to rebuild that wall mid-wave, while you've also got enemies in the sky that are dropping bombs on other deployments that you've made. It gets quite intense. There's a lot going on in later levels. And this is compounded by the fact that later you'll earn upgrades for your towers, which can be, again, done mid-wave. You're not just sitting around waiting for these things to execute. You create a plan at the start, sure, but once you activate that wave, it doesn't stop there. The first few levels are pretty basic and you'll deploy and then just watch it happen. But once you've got through 4 or 5 levels, suddenly there is constantly things happening all over the map, which you must ensure that you are dividing your attention between, while keeping alert of what else is going on other spaces. And then you add into this boss fights, of which there aren't many, but each one does add in another unique mechanic in which you need to concentrate on taking out the boss, while still ensuring that the pathways and the general enemies, both on the ground and flying, are taken care of at the same time. Couple with this the fact that the game looks absolutely fantastic. It's bright and colourful, as you would expect. The story is delivered through 3D comic book panels that are animated and look lovely. And then the actual game, the maps are really well drawn out and very clear despite being very detailed. And of course, the big selling point for the Smurfs Flower Defense has been MR. Now, personally, I still prefer to play the game in VR. There's an option in the menu which is super easy to switch between VR and MR, and my preference was the VR mode. But when you're playing an MR, you literally have the map become a floating island in your space, in your real world space. Everything functions exactly the same, it's just that now you can see your living room and other people that may be in your space. As I say, personally I prefer the VR mode, but then, I've been in VR for a while and I'm pretty old school when it comes to that. But the fact that it functions exactly the same, whether in VR or MR, shows the quality of production that has gone into the Smurfs Flower Defense. And so, as I say, it would be easy to dismiss this as a game that, it's for kids. But in actual fact, even by the time you're doing the end of the first act, there is a lot going on and a lot to divide your attention between, a lot to concentrate on. And what's more, the game comes later in the game, you will unlock a hard mode, and this really ups the tempo. There's so much going on in the Smurfs Flower Defense that honestly, it's really upping the level of what we should expect from tower defense games in VR and MR on your MetaQuest headset.
Okay.
Yes!
This is easily the best tower defense game I have experienced in VR, and I have played a lot of tower defense games. It's been developed by Microids, which is a studio that has a middling reputation across gaming as a whole. They've had some super hits and also developed some games which have been considered some of the worst games released in that year. And their VR chops are not exactly high tier. But the Smurfs Flower Defense changes all of that. This is a game that I will recommend to anyone with a passing interest in strategy, resource management, or tower defense games. As the game is so detailed in its campaign mode, it's a real shame there's no skirmish mode that goes along with this. It would be great to be able to set levels up to your own preference. Say you want 4 tracks for enemies to come at you with, and select a pool of enemies and an amount of resources to begin with, and then engage on a more personalised basis. As honestly, once the campaign is done, as lengthy as it is, there's not really much reason to come back. I'm sure that as time goes on, and if the game finds success, there will be more content added down the line. And please, let's go out and make this game a success, because it is worth it. There's an old adage, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which is don't judge a book by its cover. But in terms of VR and Smurfs Flower Defense, this is very much do not judge a VR title by the IP it's attached to. The Smurfs Flower Defense is a fantastic tower defense game built specifically for VR or MR, and it comes highly recommended.